Welcome everybody to episode 10 of the Profits for Sanity podcast. I'm your host, Dominic Caminata, CEO of Grosso University, the industry-leading sales training group. In the world of business, we firmly believe, of course, that volume is for vanity and profit is for sanity. And as you already know, it's the mission of this podcast to bring on the brightest minds and brightest leaders that can educate you how to grow and scale a more profitable and successful business. And today I'm honored to be joined by an absolute expert in the realm of business and leadership, Josh Kosnick, who is the founder of Kairos Coaching and Consulting and also the host of the Spartan Leadership podcast, which hopefully I have the honor of being on that very soon. He owns an amazing property called Five Bridges Farm, where he also hosts live educational events to empower leaders to learn the skills to better command their teams and, of course, to continue to grow and multiply that success. As you'll see, Josh has a genuine passion for guiding entrepreneurs to have the business and life of their dreams as an absolute mountain of wisdom in so many areas. So Josh, I just first want to thank you for driving out here to our Grosso University studio. And of course, I know your time is valuable, so we don't take this lightly, and I know our audience is going to gain some valuable insights. So I've been watching some of your shows, so trying to get prepared for this interview. And the thing I like about you, first of all, is your genuine authenticity. You speak your mind. You're not afraid to share deep down how you truly feel about things. And we'll talk more about that. But anybody that wants to learn more about leadership, being a man, and taking control of your life, make sure you check out his Spartan Leadership podcast. It's some really inspirational guests you've had on there. How many episodes have you filmed of that?
So we released 175 this week, so I think I have 185 in the queue. So looking forward to getting to that 200th episode. It's been quite a journey.
Yeah, maybe I'll be 200. No, hopefully
possibly.
I get in there sooner.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got obviously a tremendous background in business, a lot of success, but let's kind of start at the beginning of your business journey. I guess you got a lot of things you've done, but I want to talk about this journey in Northwestern Mutual, kind of the lessons learned, how that experience transpired, and ultimately after Northwestern Mutual, what gave you that inspiration to now become a very in demand and a very renowned coach and leadership consultant?
Yeah, so thank you for having me here. First of all, it's
my pleasure.
It's going to be a fun conversation, so everyone buckle up. So starting with that, at 24, I entered that field of financial advisory. And really, I had seen the impact that my father had. He started when I was 6 months old with Northwestern, 1981. That ages me here. People can actually do some math, I bet.
Yeah.
So he started, and I got to see that. But he never pressured or pushed us kids. I'm the oldest of four into the industry. 3 of the 4 of us ended up joining. Okay. Both my brothers are still there. And at 24, I was a sales manager at Best Buy. I had been for a couple of years. And actually, Best Buy at that time was big time training. Did some great Stephen Covey training up in Minneapolis at their headquarters. And
I just spent $3,000 there like 2 days ago.
At Best
getting
Buy?
some new computer equipment.
Well, Best Buy, even in the early 2000s, like they were the only game in town.
Yeah.
Circuit City had gone out of business, where I started my career at 16 selling electronics. And they were, early 2000s, that was before Walmart got into the game. That was before Amazon was even in existence. At least on the electronic side, they may have been on the book side.
Isn't it weird? It's just hard to think about life like before, like all the things that we're so used to today, like Amazon, like everything online coming to your doorstep, how that never used to be a thing. You had to literally drive and go to the store. And what pisses me off is when you actually do go to the store and they say, well, go on our website. I'm like, why the hell do you have the store?
Why am I here? Exactly. Or, a little side tangent is, you and I are of the age that we're the last generation that remembers what life was like before the internet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just a crazy thing to think about. Like our kids will never know a time where we can't call someone and see their face.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Whereas we had the cordless or corded or cordless phones when we grew up, and we had to remember people's phone numbers.
Yeah.
So
I remember all my friends' phone numbers back then. It was pretty easy. But
I still remember my home numbers.
I barely remember my own phone number at this point.
Yeah, exactly. So it was pretty interesting. I asked for a raise. I was running a top 3 store in the country, and out of Madison, Wisconsin, which was pretty unheard of. But I asked for a raise because I knew some other managers in my district getting paid more than I was, and I was kicking their ass month in and month out. And they told me no. And that week, someone called me from Northwestern Mutual. So I remember the call coming in, and I'm sitting behind the bridge. Exactly, right? Timing is everything. I'm sitting behind the bridge of customer service, take that phone call. My dad didn't put him up to it. He was just calling to see if he could work with me on financial services. And I remember sitting back in the chair after being told no for a raise, because I was always taught if you do better, you get more. That's just continue working hard and you'll produce more and you'll get more. Being told no in that instance was just a game changer for me. I realized right then and there I didn't want anyone controlling my salary ever again, my income ever again. So I called my dad begrudgingly and I said, hey, I think I want to come in and interview and do that. And he's like, all right, you're going to go through the process like everyone else. And I was like, well, I'm already going to have a target on my back with the last name, so I wouldn't want it any other way.
Exactly.
And so I started that career and hit the ground running, and I was still trying to live two lives, right? You know, I was single, I was, you know, living for the weekend, as well as trying to build a business. Well, quickly realized that doesn't work too well. I had a good first year. My income went up by at least 33% from what I was making at Best Buy. And I was still underachieving. And so after that, I had this realization. Actually, I heard someone that I respected, and he still won't admit that he ever said this. And maybe I put it in my head to have it as like an enemy out there, right? That I was a waste of talent. And that stung me so deeply.
That'll get you fired up.
And because I'd always been someone that had worked really hard, never like the most talented, fastest, strongest, just worked hard to, you know, be in that starting lineup or whatever I was trying to do. And so that stung me, and I just went to work and just built this amazing financial practice that was serving great people, worked primarily with business owners, fell in love with working with business owners because there was complex problems to solve. There's more problems to solve for business owners than there was just for the average family. And so fell in love. So 75% of my client base was business owners. And then I quickly went into leadership in that role. So because I was doing so well, they asked me to run the internship program. Then I did really well with that. Ran a top 10 internship in the company program. And then, okay, now you're going to mentor full-time advisors and recruit full-time advisors. Cool. How do I do that? Learn how to do that. Learn how to mentor and really lead and lead by example. And so I found more joy in that tenure helping others find success and build their lives and dreams than I was in just building my own practice. And so I leaned into that more, and I was eventually asked to succeed my father by the Fortune 100 company. So not that he wouldn't have chose me, but it was really a big honor that they chose me to succeed him and take over in Madison. So at age 36, I sold my book of business, my personal book, and bought the large firm, and I was leading about 250 people.
Wow.
And we were doing great, even through the pandemic, growing 30%, which, you know, sending everyone home when we were typically in a face-to-face, cross-the-table business just like this, dealing with people's dreams and financials, everything go to Zoom. That was a really turbulent time. We're like, okay, we got to make sure everyone's technology is set up. We got to figure out how we're going to do this and really take care of everyone's mental health in that time frame. Because everyone was scared. Like, is business going to drop? Is income going to drop? How are we going to navigate this? How are our clients going to feel? The economy's taking a shit. The market is taking a shit. Like, we're fielding phone calls from everywhere. And just keeping the peace at that time. So through that tenure, I ran that for 5 years and then had an unceremonious ending with my last exit with them. And it went like this. And this is a great lesson for business owners. So in my tenure of running the firm, I had an amazing leadership team. There was one problem. I had one cancer on the leadership team. And that cancer manifested in the form of severe narcissist. Now, I will say one of my learning lessons is I had developed plenty of immature leaders into being mature adults, both men and women. I thought that he was immature and that I could develop him out of it. What I was mistaking for immaturity were actual character flaws. And in that sense, he started to use the political environment to start pinning me as a racist and preventing him from holding him back. Now, what's funny about that is there's a whole article written in Madison business publications across the country and social media posts because I had appointed him the youngest African-American managing director in company history.
Oh, wow.
And somehow, in his head, I was holding him back. And really, it was just trying to take me down to further his own career. And so through this, you know, there's lessons that I learned. I doubt there was any lessons he learned. But in that regard, when the reason I didn't terminate him sooner is because I was fearful of getting sued. When I realized 18 months before everything went down that that I should have fired him because he gave me an ultimatum. And I doubt any business owner listening to this appreciates someone giving them an ultimatum. If you do, that would be a strange topic to broach, and I'd love to have that conversation with you on how you accept those. That being said, I was fearful. I thought I was going to get sued if I fired him. Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out, me trying to help him and continue to further his career, I end up getting sued anyhow. Yeah. So I get sued after I find him a different leader to follow, because clearly we weren't working out, get him moved to a leader that hopefully could bring him up in the way that he wanted to be brought up. 3 months later, I get served with papers. Oh, yeah. And a month after that, Northwestern decides that I'm too big of a liability, and when I needed them most, they turn their backs on me. Now, in that sense, I had to, I owned the business, so they had to buy me out, and there was a negotiation that we went through with that. Yeah. So I say it was an unceremonious exit because my dream was to run that from age 36 to 56, grow it as big as possible, and have as much impact as possible, and then figure out what I was going to do from 55 or 56 till I died. Because, entrepreneurs, we don't really retire.
Well, I think about that a lot because there's people in my line of work in this industry, and I'm not going to name any names, but there's people in their 90s still out there running events, doing consulting and training because they just love what they do. If you do what you love and call it work, you don't necessarily have to put a time limit on it, but certainly you can easily picture dedicating a good chunk of your life to it, especially like you get a lot of fulfillment, which is a characteristic of great leaders, on helping others succeed and realizing their dreams and goals and ambitions in life. So yeah, having that cut short by this situation when you thought you were doing the right thing. And again, this is the lessons we learn, but now with every obstacle, every challenge, every experience, whether good or bad, sends you on a direction where maybe that's an opportunity where I can take this lesson or take this experience. Now I can really expand this, which is clearly what you've done, and help more people on a grander level.
Yeah, so I'll abbreviate this story, but I get called to the Marriott that morning. It was June 16th, 2021. Now, mind you, we grew the business by 30% the year before. Everything is going great. We're recruiting and developing at a really high level. I get this call from the executive vice president, hey, meet me at the Marriott on the west side, which is a stone's throw from my office where I owned 35,000 square feet. And I walk in, and as soon as my butt hits the chair, Josh, there's no easy way to say this, we're moving in a different direction. And my world just shatters. Yeah. Everything I had ever known since I was 6 months old and poured loyalty into this company and built this amazing business was now gone. Yeah. And so I'm in the pits of despair. Like I had to pull over at the park and ride in Middleton because I was crying so hard I couldn't see the road. Oh my gosh. And I'm sitting there trying to gather myself before I go home and figure out how I'm going to tell my wife. Mm-hmm. And so that whole day, the next week and so is a fog, but I got this whisper from God. Got this whisper. Mm-hmm. And it was only God because it was just very brief. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what it meant at the time, but he said, you're free. Wow. You're free. And so through the 6 months of my negotiation with them, now I'm in 2 legal battles, one the civil suit, which lasted a year and a half, the 6-month negotiation working with Northwestern to buy out and figure out next steps. My hands were tied. Now, keep in mind, entrepreneurs listening, I can't do anything because anything that I would do would hurt my case in my negotiation on the buyout because I'm getting recruited by every financial firm across the country. Mm-hmm. And my leverage was that if I started another firm or chose another offer at another firm, that I would take all my advisors with me, and mm-hmm. I had great relationships with them. And that was a real threat to them. So even though about 3 months into it, I figure out, hey, I'm going to lean away and actually do coaching and develop people and speak nationwide and have a bigger impact. I couldn't even do that because I would ruin all my leverage. So I literally had to sit for 6 months and negotiate this and work through. Now the blessing in that was it gave me the time to actually process the grief, process all the different feelings and emotions that I had about it, actually learn to forgive and be able to dream about the future. That was the blessing in that 6 months. Mm-hmm. Financially, we were fine. I had done a really good job. I had paid off all the debt within 4.5 years from buying the business. So we did a really good job. That being said, as a type A entrepreneur, I want to have an impact. And my hands are tied. Mm-hmm. So I started coaching people for free. and just being able to be of service. And then 6 months later, so it was a real blessing, another God thing that happened. On December 29th of 2021, I closed my deal with Northwestern. On December 30th, I bought 5 bridges. And so my intent there then was to create a space, because I started saying to my wife, I want to coach and speak. And she goes, yeah, I don't want you gone all the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, we got 4 young kids. You got 2 young kids. Like, understandable, right? So I go, okay, I had this field of dreams moment in some of my meditation time where it's like, if you build it, they'll come.
Yeah.
So I went to look for 80 to 100 acres where I could do that, and found this amazing property. Happened to know another God intertwining here. The guy that owned it was the one that built our first home, Jenna and I's first home. Wow, so when I go out there, they asked me to sign an NDA. I'm like, why am I signing an NDA? I'm viewing a property. And all the owners just really private. I'm like, well, if I'm signing this, who is it? And they tell me, and I was like, oh, well, tell him to be here next time.
I know him.
I know him.
Yeah.
Great builder. You'd know him as well. And it was really just God led. And so now since then, we built out the 5 bridges, and it's really been about pouring into people on all the lessons that I learned. And we can get into those whenever you want.
It's interesting you mentioned a God whisper, and obviously very incredible, inspiring story already, and we barely scratched the surface, so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I can see you just have a lot of emotion, I almost can tell you're reliving that experience in your life when you're sharing that story. So for me personally, I had I never thought of it as a God whisper. I'm glad you told me that, because I was very successful, making 7 figures a year as a trainer in the home improvement industry. I had a huge team that I built. It took me 10 years to build. Team was doing $100 million a year, kicking ass, taking names. But my dream was to take over Rick Grosso's legacy. That's why my company's called Grosso University. I took over my mentor's legacy. His name's Rick Grosso. He was like the Zig Ziglar of the home improvement industry, and left an incredible impact on me, changed my life, changed the lives of umpteen thousands of people. But I was given an ultimatum it was 2020, was you either stay here as the sales leader, sales trainer, or you do the consulting thing that you wanted to do, because that was my chance to take over his legacy. They fell around the same time. But you can't do both, because we can't have you train the competition. It was actually a friend of mine, because he knew I was on the fence. I don't know what to do. Do I pursue my dream of being the national sales trainer, have my own business, you're free? Or do I continue doing what I'm doing? I love both paths. But he went to church, and the actual big message of the day was, occasionally if you want to walk on water, you got to be willing to jump out of the boat. And he shared that with me, and I'm like, damn, that hits home for me right now, because there's a lot of comfort and security in the boat. I could stay here and just keep rowing, but if I ever want to see if I have what it takes to walk on water, I got to be willing to take the leap of faith, and it definitely was. But yeah, similar experience. It's hard to explain, but it left such a profound impact on me. I'm like, I knew that this was the right decision. And now I've been at this for 5 years. And I couldn't think of this is what I want to do the rest of my life. Similar way, having the impact on so many people's lives. And COVID for me was definitely a blessing. Obviously, it was a horrific experience for everybody involved, but it turned out to be a blessing for my business, because in a similar fashion, my wife, Kelly, she doesn't want me living out of my suitcase. I got 2 kids, they're young. I want to be present as a father, but I can do most of my business virtually. Most of my training, most of my business back and forth, a lot of the stuff we do is done virtually now. That never occurred to me that would even be a thing when I first started this. I thought I was going to be traveling, going to place of business, doing in-person boot camps and events. But the reach I have now, I can train anyone in the world, really, 24/7, 365, with virtual training or online university. So it kind of forced me to evolve really quickly. And I know you had to make some quick decisions. How am I going to meet with our clients? We're used to meeting at a table, now we got to go virtual. And yeah, it's just crazy how quickly we've all had to adapt and evolve. But all these things, they kind of toughen you up. They give you kind of alligator skin over time as you keep pushing through your fears or these challenges and obstacles, and you get to the other side. Because again, that was a very scary period in my life, and I wasn't bawling my eyes out, but I had moments at this turning point in my life between being the sales trainer and starting Grosso University, where I was crying and I was like, my big therapeutic thing I do is play the piano. I'm not amazing at it, but it's very therapeutic for me, the vibration
It's kind of
of
cathartic.
it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And throughout that period, I actually wrote a song, and I named the song Walking on Water, named after this mental battle I was going through in my life at the time, and now getting to the other end. And the song kind of plays. It starts off kind of like sad and emotional, and then there's like a spark of inspiration, then some positive momentum, then it ends powerfully. I haven't gotten to the powerful end of the song yet in terms of my career, but that's what I'm striving for.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But I can relate to a lot of the stuff that you're saying, and definitely hits home.
Yeah, it was a dark period, and that's the thing I try and I tell that story often. And yeah, it is emotional. It's harder to. It's getting easier. It is hard to relive, but it's getting easier in telling it because I can think about it more rationally right now. Yeah. But regardless of what any entrepreneur has been through or gone through, like we all have struggles. Yeah. And we're all going to get kicked down the mountain in one way or another, whether it's divorce, whether it's loss of a child, whether it's a health scare, or whether it's being unjustly terminated like I was. Like you're going to go through it. Now, how do you get through it is the thing. And like so, if I go to my 5 bridges, what I really realized there was most of us spend our time in bridge 4. In bridge 4 I call your environment, but it's really your professional, your financial, and then I blend in there your creative and your joy. Yeah. What do you do for fun outside of that? But the reason we spend the most of our time there is even from our youth, we're asking our kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then you go to college and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to college to be able to do this. And then you get ingrained in the professional career and it's just all about climbing the ladder and creating a financial stability for yourself. Well, the problem with that is the Bible tells us no idols above God. And my naivety many years ago was thinking about other gods in that regard. But anything in your life can be an idol. Yeah. So idols for me were Northwestern Mutual. An idol for me was positional. An idol for me was money or success or whatever it may be. An idol could even be your spouse or your kids if you're putting them above God. Yeah. Right? So we all have these, tendencies to place more importance on other things or people above God, and that's not the way. Yeah. So I created the bridges in being that we got to do these in order. So spiritual is number 1. Now, you don't have to believe in God like Dom and I do, right, but you got to get right with our spirit because all of us have been in a room with a dead body that of a loved one or whatever it may be, and we realize that the body is there and the spirit is gone. Right. So regardless of your belief, like you have to get right with your spirit first. For you and I, that's God. For someone else, that might be something different. Number 2 then is internal, our mental health, our emotional health, our physical being. Because we can't show up to be our best selves for those that we serve if we're not our best. That's very much the reason that when we step on an airplane, the flight attendants always say, in a case of emergency, put your oxygen mask on first before assisting others. Yeah. I say that often because it bears repeating. You cannot serve others if you're not at your mental and physical and emotional best. Yep. So that's bridge 2. Bridge 3 is then relationships. Anytime someone is struggling in a relationship, it blends into their work. It bleeds into their work, right? So if you're having a fight with your spouse, guarantee those emotions come up the next day and it affects your work.
Yeah, especially, salespeople, it's 100%. You sell proportionate to how you feel, and I put a lot of focus when I'm working with owners and sales leaders. Make sure that the wife, the spouse, significant other, their partner in life is equally as recognized, is equally as cheered on, and they're equally as invested into company activities. Because if the spouse isn't supporting what the salesperson's doing, or they have tension at home, or even worse, the relationship is falling apart because the sales rep's always on the road running these leads, that's going to impact his performance more than anything.
100%. So it's tending the garden, right? So if you don't tend the garden of your relationship with God first, and then yourself, and then your spouse, and then your kids, and then everyone else, that will bleed into your work. And that's why it has to be bridge 3. Then we get to bridge 4, which is your environment, your professional, your creative, your financial, everything that allows you to progress in life. And if we get those right, we get to bridge 5, which is your legacy and what you leave behind and what you want to leave behind. So you talked about my podcast earlier. My marketing guy at Northwestern at the time gave me all the great reasons marketing-wise why I should start a podcast. And it sounded great, right? We can bring more attention to the firm. You can talk about the leaders here, the advisors here, bring in other minds from the community. Yeah. All great stuff. And I said, Chad, that's awesome. that's not the reason I'm going to do it. The reason I'm going to do it is because we're 2 generations away from being forgotten.
Yeah.
And now in a day and age, we say that, the internet never forgets, like we kind of joke about that,
Well,
right?
they can delete stuff real easy.
But they can delete it real easy. That being said, is if I record all these, or if I write a book or any of that nature, my kids, my grandkids, my great-grandkids, and so on and so forth down the line will always have my voice, will always have my thoughts, will know exactly where I was in that point in life, and will always be able to go back to that. And just think about, like, on my phone, my father-in-law passed 6 years ago. On my phone, and I told you earlier, Jenna and I have shared, Apple account. We have saved voice messages from him because we want his voice, right? She will listen to those every so often. I will listen to those every so often to hear his voice because we miss him dearly, right? If anything ever happens to me, like I was in financial advising, right? Life insurance was part of it. I delivered death claim checks. Like I realized the mortality very much so. My kids will always have my voice.
That's amazing. Definitely love that. It's kind of like a way to time travel too, because as I'm pushing more content out there, every now and then I'll look back on a video that I created like 4 or 5 years ago, and it kind of allows me to relive that experience and the thoughts and feelings I had at that point in my life. It's kind of like a way you're journaling via video. So you're kind of documenting your life and your experiences, because especially with your podcast, I see obviously you have a lot of diverse types of guests out there, but you're really speaking to kind of front and center what's very important in the world, what's important, what's on your mind, stuff that you feel people need to hear at that moment. So for you, it's almost like a way you're kind of journaling your life through video too, so your kids can kind of live through that later on.
Yeah, and our thoughts are going to evolve. So you mentioned 5 years ago. Like I'm hopeful and feel blessed enough, 40 years from now that I'm still doing the podcast, and they'll have this long library of, here's how dad or grandpa or great grandpa evolved his thinking over time. Yeah. Because we should be evolving at all times.
It's interesting. You're talking about taking care of yourself. I forget what book I was reading recently, but it was just like, it's crazy how hard it is for someone to look in the mirror. You look at yourself. It's not me saying this to you, by the way. And it's just, I love you, right? I love you. But I'm not saying that to you. I do love you, man. But
you're
saying that you love yourself.
Yeah.
You're saying it to yourself. Like, it feels weird. It feels uncomfortable. It feels awkward. You feel like, almost like I'm being selfish by loving myself. And to your point, how are you ever going to have enough love and care to be able to share with anybody else if you first don't love yourself first? And think about everything you do all day long, everything you put into your mouth. Is this showing that you love yourself? The poisons and toxins, the stuff I'm drinking and eating, is that showing yourself love? The things that, again, I'm doing physically, am I getting the exercise? Am I taking care of myself, taking care of my temple, right, as God commands us to do? And I think about that a lot. And Rick Grosso used to preach that to me all the time, is, as part of the affirmations and stuff. But shouldn't you love yourself? Shouldn't you feel amazing about who you are and what you're capable of? Do you think God makes shitty products? It's like, obviously created for a reason. And I'm a firm believer that we're capable of anything. But it starts with that internal belief and love for yourself, and then you do have the capacity to share with everyone else.
Well, I know you got a lot of salespeople that listen to this, so let's speak to them real quickly, because this is a sales hack, if there is a hack, right? I don't know that there's many hacks in life, but you can build towards them.
Well, if it's a sales hack, it's a life hack, because sales is in our lives all day long.
That's right. How you got your beautiful spouse, how I got mine. We're great at sales.
That's right.
So here's the hack. The best salespeople in the world aren't the ones with the best language. They're the ones that have the most self-worth and self-confidence.
Yep.
They're the ones that actually believe in themselves enough to believe what they're producing or selling.
Yep. I agree 100%.
So because if you're taking care of yourself, taking care of your temple, and actually love yourself and have an authenticity about you, you are going to sell more than someone that has just the best language. Because you or I are real people, real business owners, and I think most business owners are real people because they've been through some of the hardest things. Being an entrepreneur is the hardest thing you're going to do. They can read right through your bullshit. And so if you're a bullshit person because you're bullshitting yourself, the language doesn't matter. You can have the best language. You can be the smoothest operator.
It's a very small percentage of actual communication.
Right. But if your body language doesn't exude self-confidence and self-worth, like I want to buy from someone that truly believes in A, themselves, and B, the product that they're selling.
Yeah.
I don't care if that's shingles or life insurance.
Yep.
In fact, my dad told me this story because he was a very good salesperson as well. And he was early on in his career, and he was sitting across the kitchen table from a family that was much, probably 20 years a senior at that time. He started in his mid-20s. And the guy looks at him and goes, "Kid, I have no idea what you're selling or what you're, like, I don't understand this. But you're so damn passionate about it. Sign me up."
Yeah, that's awesome. So one exercise I train salespeople to do is before they leave a house, and this is part of the cool down phase, you always have the prospect or the new customer now sell the job back to you, sell the project back to you. So they're going to sell back to you the reasons why they felt secure moving forward on the project this evening or this afternoon. And inevitably, the first thing they always bring up is the salesperson. So they bring up the salesperson. The customer's like, "Well, you did such a great job. You're just super professional. We like how you explained everything. You made us feel comfortable." Because at the end of the day, especially in our industry, we're selling a fantasy. Because in this industry, they sell all the amazing things that could happen with a successful install, but nothing guarantees the end result when you sell an unfinished good like windows and siding and roofing. A lot of this stuff has to be custom manufactured. So they're really buying that salesperson. But again, I start off my training, step one of our sales process is preparation. And I actually created an acronym called SALES. It stands for sleep, affirmation, learn, exercise, and sustenance. And it's a very simplified formula for having a successful morning routine. But the big headline message is take care of yourself first. The first most important sale you have to make is selling yourself to yourself. Make sure you're optimal. Make sure you have the stamina, because this is exhausting, right? Going into strangers' houses, having to constantly be in your A game. Going in there, they don't know who you are, what you do, and then trying, in some cases, walk out with a whole year's salary of their money to invest in their home. That takes a lot of trust, takes a lot of energy, takes enthusiasm, right? And you do sell proportionate to how you feel, of course. But very little is being talked about health and wellness in the realm of sales. But that's why I created step one, preparation, everything that leads up before you knock on the prospect's door. What are you doing to give yourself that positive momentum, give yourself the upper hand? Because we want you to be a shining star, not a shooting star.
And it's not Monster Energy drink.
It's not Monster, no. That's poison. Pure poison.
That's right. So to your preparation,
yeah,
with building, so people want to know, okay, well, perhaps someone's listening and goes, well, how do I build self-confidence and self-worth, which leads to self-efficacy, which is the pinnacle? It's by doing what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
And that's the little things. All the little things add to the big things, which I know you know. But it's like if I say I'm going to brush my teeth twice a day, I brush my teeth twice a day. If I say I'm going to the gym at 6 a.m., I go to the gym at 6 a.m. Because you're building a case for yourself that you are who the fuck you say you are.
Yeah.
And that builds your self-confidence, which builds your self-worth, which leads to self-efficacy that allows you to sell, that allows you to be the leader that you need to be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, sometimes if I am not doing what I say I'm going to do, like getting to the gym, losing weight or whatever, because, during the pandemic phase, as you know, I'm training for a competition now. But I got more into the drinking, less into the opening the gym door, more into the making excuses, more into the now I'm feeling old. Now, what the hell's going on, Dominic? So every now and then I need to kick myself in the ass and challenge myself, because I feel like it's really when we challenge ourselves, that's where the real growth is. And sometimes it's the really uncomfortable challenges that we put ourselves through. But sometimes I have to give myself a goal and a deadline of health and wellness. So by this date, by this time, I commit to it. And, for example, since I committed to this bodybuilding competition, I've dropped 45 pounds and I feel amazing. I feel like 10 times better. It's like, there's enough problems in the world right now. I don't need this extra weight on my back, It's like literally. But that really helps me is, sometimes, whatever it is, give yourself that goal, that deadline, make sure you come up with a roadmap on how to get there. You hold yourself accountable. And like you said, do what you say you're going to do. Because there's an ocean between knowing what to do and actually doing it. They say attitude, determines altitude, but it's attitude and action. You got to take action, which ultimately determines your altitude.
Yeah,
right?
Common sense isn't necessarily common practice.
It's not. So obviously, you had this amazing background. You went through some trials and tribulation. I want to tell you, our audience is going to relate to that in a big way because no offense to the industry, but I find this industry is full of a lot of people that they learned through cost prohibitive trial and error, had a hard knock life. They went through the school of hard knocks, so to speak. A lot of broken toys in the industry, so to speak, that have these amazing comeback stories. Some of the most successful people I know were literally kicked to the bottom and beaten and bruised, and they somehow figure out a way to pick themselves back up. And
those are my favorite people.
Exactly. This industry's full of people like that. Now, getting into your Kairos coaching and consulting now, what are the primary things that your clients are coming to you for? And as a result of that, what are the more common challenges that you're seeing, whether it's in leadership, whether it's just in finance or business? What are some of the reoccurring challenges that, I know it can be anything, but that you see that people come to you for in the beginning?
Yeah, so overarching theme and then two specific issues. So the overarching theme is I provide them hope with the trials and tribulations, right? Like if I can get through this, you can get through this. Like I was kicked to the bottom, right? From the mountaintop. So, and then being able to climb my way out both physically, mentally, spiritually, and come out the other side and rebuild my life from the bottom. Yeah. Which before then, everyone just saw a straight trajectory up. So I wasn't as relatable.
Right.
Now I became human. And that's attractive to people because people are attracted not through your strengths. They can be impressed by your strengths, but they're attracted through your weaknesses. And so then when I work with business owners, let's say I'm doing an introduction call, I get introduced to someone. All business owners, I've learned this, have two major problems and then like 136 issues underneath those, right? And the two major problems are human or leadership development, because people are emotional beings. They are the most difficult part of business and running a business. And the second one is systems and processes to help them grow. So depending on which is their biggest issue at this time, we dive deep on that. So if it's leadership, then we go through more of the leadership and human development. Because most business owners, what I find is they know it's important to develop their people. They're not making time to do it. They're not investing in their people enough, whether it's through something like you or I do, or it's actually them taking the time to express what they're learning and actually parlaying those lessons into their people. They're just not making the time. We're all busy. We have to prioritize that as a time frame because the evolution of our people evolves our business. So that leadership development is really, really crucial. And then the second one on systems and processes, that's where EOS comes into play. I utilized EOS when I owned the firm at Northwestern, and I tried to self-implement, and I can confidently say now that I've been fully trained and involved in that world for a number of years now, I might have gotten 20% of it right. Yeah. And had I not been so ADD and read the kind of epilogue of the book, I would have known that I could have stroked a check to an implementer like me and had someone come in and actually do it properly. Yeah. I just didn't read that part of the book. Yeah. And so, because I would have gladly stroked that check. And it probably would have saved me the headache of that cancer in my organization. Because having a third party in the room in my leadership meetings, they would have pulled me aside and say, hey, Josh, you got a problem. Yeah. I was too close to the forest to see the trees. I thought I could develop them out of it. Right. And so the systems and processes side, the EOS, has been an absolute game changer. It was in my previous business, even though I only got 20% of it right. The goal is to get to 80% proficiency in EOS. 100% is utopia. None of us ever get there. Yeah. Even if we think so, that's more of our arrogance or ego than 80% is the mark. And so I dive deep on EOS, and it's one of those game changers. Like, it's implemented in tens of thousands of businesses. And it's a proven model over 100 years. Gino Wickman did a brilliant job of not like inventing anything original, but cobbling together the geniuses of the last century and putting those into a package called Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS. Yeah. And so businesses that implement this are actually seeing on average a 34.4% year-over-year growth. Yeah. And it's allowing them to have more time to do what they actually want to do outside of their business, which is the bigger thing, actually live their life. So one of my taglines that I said flippantly one day, and my marketing guy's like, oh, that's good. And I said, I help business owners take a vacation without checking their email or phone.
That's very difficult for owners to do. Yeah. They're glued to that thing.
Right. So I give the analogy. I'll give you one that I use in any leadership meeting that I go into when we start an EOS conversation. I say, okay, we're going to create a scorecard. Most people have KPIs and different stuff that they track. And they do that over time. But I said, okay, we're going to figure out what's the most important KPI. So here's the example I want you to use. So like you, Dom, are the owner. You're down in you were just in Greece. So we'll use that as an example. You're over in Greece and you have no access to cellular, no access to email. You cannot call the business back home and figure out what's going on. But a cabana boy or cabana girl is going to bring you your drink, and they're going to bring you a napkin. And on that napkin is everything you need to know what's going on in your business so that you feel peace. What needs to be on that napkin? And that's how we start the conversation on key measurables, because oftentimes people have like 30 KPIs that they're tracking at any given time. And it's like, that's far too many. So one of the biggest things with EOS is how do we simplify everything? Because it's one of the key leadership principles when we start hitting the ceiling as we're trying to grow, is we've overcomplicated things. So EOS is all about simplifying to the lowest piece where we can, where we have all the key information that we need and not any fluff or anything more.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I have one of my clients that, like, I think a year ago, he implemented EOS into his home improvement business. And he goes to Colombia, like, I don't know, 6-7 times a year. And when he's there, his phone's off. I mean, his business is operating efficiently, absent of himself. And you want to talk about, especially in our industry, the value of that. Right now, our industry, there's a mass consolidation occurring, which is happening all over the world. But in the home improvement industry, there's a lot of private equity buying up companies or gobbling it up like crazy. And of course, everyone's trying to get the maximum multiplier on their EBITDA and all this stuff. You know, some companies come in at 8 times, some companies come in at 12 times. I've heard as high as 20 times EBITDA. But the companies that are getting the biggest multipliers are the companies that have those systems and processes in place where they know, absent of the upper management or the owner, this thing can keep humming in all cylinders, right?
Yeah.
That's what really tremendously compounds the value of your business.
Yep.
If you do want to exit, or maybe even do a partial exit where you can travel with your phone off, you know?
PE loves EOS.
Yeah.
Because PE knows the power of having the systems, the processes, and the right people in the right seats.
Yeah.
So if you really want to get that highest EBITDA, you need to implement EOS, and PE will be knocking at your door all day long at a higher multiple than you otherwise would have had of.
Yeah, so that right there, if you're looking to get more efficient, optimize your business, get all the systems and processes in place, get on this EOS system, reach out to Josh. He's going to hook you up. He's going to give you the Grosso discount too.
Yeah, that's right. So, well, and even if I'm not the right personality fit or whatever, like we live in an abundance world. I don't believe in scarcity. Like there's more than enough business. So if I'm not in the right part of the country and I can introduce you to another implementer that's, you know, in a different spot. I do travel for some clients, but like I said earlier, I'm trying to stay as home as possible. All my travel clients come to Five Bridges for their annual 2-day meetup because it's just an unbelievable place to be. But on their quarterly meetings and stuff like that, I'm usually flying out.
Nice. No, that's amazing. And I want to talk to you also. I know obviously leadership is a huge pillar that you focus on. And I love that you talk about leading by example, because that seems to be lacking in the world today. A lot of leaders, they just want to sit behind a desk, twiddle their thumbs, and just bark orders at their team. You know, they're a demander, not a commander. So what are some of the common, I guess, mistakes you see leaders making? Or I guess, you know, sometimes people get leadership on an org chart, but it doesn't mean they're a leader. You know, the common issues you see with leadership today, and then we'll transition, you know, what are some of the things that all leaders can begin working on their own accord to become better leaders? You know, some of the common traits of effective high-level leadership.
Yeah, so one of the biggest mistakes is for sure leaders thinking that people aren't paying attention to everything that they do.
Yeah, you're always on parade as a leader.
Always.
Yeah.
And that's not just in your business. It's in your personal life.
24/7.
Because here's the thing is they're always watching, just like your kids are always watching. And if you're not living a righteous life outside of your business, as well as inside of it, they can see right through your orders inside the business.
Yep.
If you're not leading by example in all facets, whether that be your physical health, your mental health, the way you lead your family, they see right through it.
Yeah.
And they're going to take you at least half serious, if not serious at all. So I think that's one of the biggest mistakes leaders think. They think they can just be one person inside the business and a totally different person outside of the business.
So I love the Brian Tracy quote. I often share it because I do a lot of leadership presentations. He says, become the kind of leader that others will follow voluntarily, even if you have no title or position.
Yeah.
You know, being like that, it is who you are. It's not a profession. It's not a job title. It's, you got to be that person 24/7, 365. Because it's almost like your team are actively seeking out reasons to not respect you, not like you, not listen to you, ways in which you're hypocritical. You're saying one thing at the meeting, and then I see you out in public doing a different thing. And leading by example, I constantly preach this. If I want a team of like sales warriors, so to speak, that are fit, that are healthy, that are full of energy and enthusiasm, I need to lead by example.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, when I was the sales leader at my team, when I started doing the bodybuilding, I did 3 shows while I was a sales trainer there. When they could start to see the physical development, cutting out all the boozing, they could see me meal prepping, and they could see, I was achieving this goal, transforming myself. All of a sudden, I see my salespeople coming in, they're meal prepping, they're drinking less, partying less. Sales performance increases because you sell proportionate to how you feel. But we talk about KPIs. I talk about the most important KPI is keeping people inspired. And how do I do that? Well, be someone that's inspirational, for God's sakes. Mm-hmm. If you're not an inspirational figure, if you're not there like leading by example, I had a sales leadership mastermind I did once, and I had 10 sales leaders on one call, and I had them all just throw as many words out of traits that they feel are essential for a top sales performer. Like, what are some attributes or some traits that you look for when you're interviewing a top sales candidate? And they'll say, hungry or athlete or, disciplined or, whatever. They came up with a bunch. We had like 20 different words that they were able to come up with. And I'm like, now, how many of those are you emulating yourself? Because if you're not emulating those behaviors, it's really difficult. And it's actually unfair for you to ask that of your team.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So when you're building the high leaders too, and like, let's say that you want to transition to someone in your business, let's say you don't want PE. Mm-hmm. That was one of my advisory questions that I asked business owners anytime I met. What's your ideal exit? Mm-hmm. Right? Is it to get the highest number that someone shows up with a check for? Mm-hmm. Is it to transition to a child in the business or a key employee in the business? Yeah. What is your succession plan, mm-hmm. or what would you like it to be in an ideal state? Mm-hmm. And for a lot of business owners, they don't realize, like, they may be working 16 hours a day. And so you got to ask the question, would someone want my life?
Yeah.
Right? So there might be great people on your team that could be a great business owner that don't want to work 16 hours a day. Mm-hmm. So we talked about idols earlier. Work can be an idol. Mm-hmm. You can frame your whole being around, I'm the hardest worker in the room.
Yeah.
Okay. How about you be the most efficient worker in the room?
Yeah.
Right? So like one of the advisors that I trained up and recruited became my prototype because he was the top first-year rep ever in the country, in the company's history. And everyone would come to me at a sales leadership conference or something and be like, A, how'd you find him? Mm-hmm. Like I had some silver magic bullet. And then B, does he just work harder than everyone else? I'd be like, no. You know what he figured out? He figured out that he didn't want to meet with people at 6 p.m. He'd rather meet with them at 6 a.m. Mm-hmm. So he kept a 6, a 7, and an 8 before anyone else kept one meeting.
Wow.
He rarely worked past 2, but he kept 5 or 6 meetings a day when most of you only keep 2.
So you actually have better work-life balance and better performance and efficiency.
Yeah. And he would just share with his clients, like, hey, my brain's not as efficient and not as good for you at 6 p.m. Mm-hmm. I'd rather meet with you at 6 a.m. than 6 p.m. Would you be willing to meet me at the office before you go into work? And they're like, oh, yeah, I'd prefer that too. And so then you realize the clients would prefer that versus having to do it at the end of the day when they're either trying to get kids to sports or they're drained from the day or they had this problem that their boss threw on their lap and now they're trying to switch into like work on their dreams and finance. Like, no, 6 a.m. is way better.
Yeah.
And he taught me that because I was weaning off of meeting with people in the evening because I wanted to be with my young family. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's brilliant, right? So it's about working efficiently and getting as many hours done in the day or as much efficiency and hard work done in the least amount of hours. Like, how can I have the greatest possible significance in the least amount of time?
Yeah.
Instead of, I'm just going to work 16 hours and frame my whole life around being the hardest worker in the room. Mm-hmm. I would actually argue that you're the dumbest worker in the room if that's what you're going after.
I like doing this exercise with some of the leaders I work with. I said, I want you to bullet point all the different things you're involved in on a typical day. Bullet point all the stuff, whether it be administrative stuff, involved with paperwork, looking over commissions, reviewing projects, talking with customers, talking with salespeople, whatever. Just bullet point everything that you're doing all day long. So then they list all the things, because a lot of people wear multiple hats, they get pulled in multiple directions. Now ask yourself, out of that list, how many of those activities are directly improving and enhancing the performance of your team? And and they realize that like 90% of the shit they have on their list is occupying their time is doing nothing to benefit their team. I said, now take a wild guess what most of your day probably should be spent doing as the leader of your team. Probably investing in things that can help support, enhance, and optimize the success of your team, right? So we try to work on these things, but it's about being efficient with your time. Where you spend your time matters, how you spend your time matters.
And doing what you love instead of just what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Right now, I get on small teams, as I'm an entrepreneur with a small team now as well. Like I went from 250, now I have 2 employees, right? So I'm a small team as well, and a lot of times there's stuff that needs to be done that isn't my highest value. So I get that, but for a moment, think about all the things that you do because this is an EOS tool that we teach. It's called Delegate and Elevate. And so you make a list of all the things that you do on a weekly basis and quantify the hours per task. And then you draw a quadrant, right? So a line down the middle of the paper vertically and a line down the middle horizontally. In the upper left quadrant is what Dan Sullivan calls your unique abilities. It's what you're great at doing and what you love doing. In the upper right quadrant, it's you're good at it and you kind of like it. Bottom left, you don't like it, but you're good at it. And the bottom right is you don't like it and you're not good at it. So we can all agree that the bottom right we should just get rid of.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That's the easy stuff to get rid of. We don't like it. We're not good at it. Let's find someone that actually enjoys that stuff and hand that off. And it's probably a low-cost employee for that stuff because it's an admin or whatever it may be. Now, where do you think in the other 3 quadrants people spend 80% of their time?
Things that they don't like but are good at?
Yes. Yeah. Nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So think about this. The majority of people spend 80% of their time on stuff they don't like, but they're good at. And that's why we have so many people, zombies walking around this planet that hate their jobs and hate their lives because they happen to go into something that they are good at, but they really don't like. They have no passion around. So our goal is to move that 80% from the bottom left to the upper left. The upper right is a trap because it's stuff that you are kind of good at and kind of like. But we want to spend the time, 80% of our time, in stuff that we love to do and we're great at doing. Oh, and by the way, that's the stuff that probably drives the most revenue.
Correct. Yeah. No, that's brilliant. So that EOS, again, in the industry that we're in, the home improvement industry historically is like the horse and buggy of the world. They're usually like decades behind the rest of the world. But now I'm seeing a shift where it's almost like the opposite. Home improvement industry as a whole and home services is getting madly disrupted by technology. So whether it be AI call centers, AI sales coaching, AI, you name it, fill in the blank, AI is disrupting the industry big time. And then EOS is becoming a lot more prevalent because a lot of this industry historically has been wild, wild west, shoot from the hip, make it up as you go. It's either a salesperson that became an owner or an installer that became an owner. And in either one of those categories, they have no clue how to run a business. They don't have the systems and processes. They have, and it's funny because I meet with a lot of owners, and the owners that have a sales background have no problem with sales. And the owners that have an installation background have no problem with production and installs. But then they have these blind spots, right? But having a system that has all your processes in place so your business can run more like a franchise. And there's a reason why 85% of franchises succeed, and it's like 85% of home improvement companies fail. Yeah. It's a very high percentage.
Well, and that's the case across the board as far as entrepreneurs in general, right? 90% of businesses don't make it past the first 5 years. And so what made me think of when you were talking there is like, you don't want to be the smartest person in your room.
No, that's
bad. Right? That is a bad room to be in. So you want to hire really smart people around you and put them in the seats of those unique abilities again, stuff that they love to do and they're great at doing, which is probably the inverse of what you are great at doing. So the hardest position to find is the integrator position. And so most business owners, entrepreneurs are visionary. That means they're great with big ideas. They're great at handling big relationships. They suck at managing and they suck at holding people accountable, and especially on the detail-oriented stuff. Now, we can be somewhat proficient at it if we're forced into that role, but we'll never be great at it. We'll never love it. So this is the whole premise behind why Steve Jobs got fired at Apple originally, is because he was trying to play both roles. And where people would, if you read his autobiography and stuff of that nature, actually I think it was a biography, it wasn't written by him, but people called him an asshole. People called him a tyrant. And that's why he was fired from his own company. He leaves, goes to Pixar, builds that up. Apple's floundering. They bring him back, but Steve Wozniak was there. Steve Wozniak was the integrator. So Jobs had all the visionary ideas. Woz became the integrator and actually made sure that those ideas came to fruition. And he would be like, okay, Steve, this is what a great integrator does. They're the brake to the visionary's gas.
Yeah.
They go, okay, if we take on that big idea right now, this is going to hurt over here. We're going to put too much on this person's plate and they're going to leave the company. And so that's a great idea. We got to table that to Q3. Or we got to table that for 12 months from now. And speaking more sense into the visionary, because we're always going to run with that idea and be like, oh, this is the next greatest thing. We're going to drive the most revenue from this. And we get off track from what we set out as goals or rocks for this current year. And we could cost us a key employee by doing so, by changing that direction. But visionary leaders, there's about 11% of us in the country or the world. Integrators are less than 7%. And then there are these unicorns that are a mixture of the two, and that's less than 1%. And we have a local example in Judith Faulkner, the CEO at Epic. She was able to create the stuff that became Epic software, as well as be the visionary leader. Those are true unicorns. And any of you that think you are that, you're probably more narcissistic than you are that.
Well, in this industry, it's crazy. I mean, you see owners that run sales, run marketing, run production operations, then they try to go into the home and sell, and then they can't get their hands off the steering wheel. So instead of navigating the course, choosing the destination, helping chart the course to get there, they're trying to drive the ship too. And I actually had a situation where I was working with a sales leader, for example, and did a pretty decent job in terms of coaching and leading, but he couldn't get his hands off the steering wheel. And he was actually closing about 70% of the sales for his salespeople over the phone. And I said, what happens to performance when you go on vacation? It just goes down the tank. I'm like, so is it more important for you as a leader to close the sale for them, or maybe provide them the training and support and empowerment to do it on their own accord?
Yeah.
So we give them the roadmap to get there, but they need to do it on their own. You know, we need to give them that training, support, and encouragement. That's not something to brag about, that I close 75% of the sales from my team on the phone. That's actually something you should be really scared to death of, because your company is literally walking on thin ice.
Yeah, if anything happens to you,
you're
the
done.
Company's done.
It's done.
Right, so that's where the accountability chart comes in, and everyone getting right people in the right seats. It allows you to fire yourself from some of those seats, which frees up time for you to be the true visionary that you are and lead the company to the next level. Yeah,
that's huge. So obviously a lot of great stuff, and I wanted to ask you, your podcast, you said you're 165, 175 you have?
175 released,
yeah. What was, one of the most impactful talks you think you had on there, where it's like, this episode right here just kind of shook me at my core, or made a profound impact, or this guest I had on here just absolutely blew my mind? It's hard when you have hundreds of episodes.
Yeah, so I'll give a couple examples. Every May we do a dedicated focus on mental health, being in the spirit of the month of May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so I've heard some really powerful stories. We shared our testimony because I alluded to earlier that my father-in-law deceased, but it was because of taking his own life back in 2018. And he was a great entrepreneur, great leader, great follower of Jesus, and was just an amazing example, and still had all these dark demons that very few people knew about, because he was just one of the most generous humans on the planet. And because of a Ponzi scheme that he was being taken advantage of, the business suffered, and therefore the stress became too much on top of his mental health, and he lost that battle. So every May we do something and so I encourage everyone to lean in, because too many of us we're losing too many people. I mean, we lose 22 soldiers, veterans a day to suicide. It's unacceptable. One of the greatest stories I've ever heard was Keegan Gill, Smurf, who is a pilot, had the fastest naval ejection in history, where the plane was just about to hit the ocean, and he ejected like a matter of feet before, but the G-force tore open everything on him in the seat. Jeez. His legs are flailing, snapped, and then he's in shark-infested waters. Survives because of the cold water. I mean, he's got open wounds, everything. survives, gets himself back into the cockpit somehow.
Oh my God.
Gets himself back into the cockpit, but then has too much a TBI and other stuff where he experienced vertigo in the cockpit.
Yeah.
So they had to medically retire him. He goes through a deep, dark depression, comes out of it, and is now, his story should be a movie.
Yeah.
Like it's incredible. And then probably the most, one of the most impressive just conversations. I had a conversation with Jeff Fenster, who owns Everbowl, and Drew Brees is heavily involved. I think has 250 franchises with Everbowl. Nice, healthy eating spot. I don't think we have one in Madison yet.
I don't think so.
Maybe you and I should get
Yeah,
on that.
let's do it.
We'll hit
Let's
Jeff
do it.
up because Forage is one of my healthy, eat out spots, but
Yeah.
we don't have a ton.
No.
But back when I had my office in Middleton, Cafe Zupa's was a great spot. But his conversation on the relationship bank, and he wrote a book about this, is really key. And this is a key concept for everyone. Like you and I, just in this conversation, like me being here, you coming on my podcast, we're pouring into it. We're making deposits in each other's banks.
Yeah.
And ever so often we can make withdrawals with an ask, right? But if you're constantly on the negative and you're asking for withdrawals all the time, that impacts the relationship to the point that you may not have a relationship anymore. So we always got to keep kind of tabs on how many deposits versus withdrawals we're making with our spouse, with our kids, with our business relationships, and just quantifying that, at least mentally, on what the deposits and withdrawals that we're making on a daily basis can really aid in our building of relationships over time. So I thought that was a really, really powerful concept in the conversation.
Yeah. No, obviously amazing stuff. And I wanted to end on a couple topics real quick. And obviously we could talk for hours about anything and everything. But I want to talk to you. I know health and wellness is a big part of your life. I see you training constantly. You just did 75 hard, I think. How many times have you done 75 hard?
This year was number 3. I'll do it every year until I can't.
Yeah. So I guess, for those people watching, because I do want to get this message across in terms of health and wellness and how that impacts everything in your life. It's got to be one of the biggest foundational pillars of, starting your day, getting right with your body and mind. So I guess, how do you feel training, health and wellness, being physically well has impacted? Why is that such an important pillar of your life?
It brought me out of the darkness.
Yeah.
So I've been going to Carbon since 2016 when they opened. But in 2021, when everything, it was 2021 when everything fell apart, January, after I negotiated the deal, bought 5 bridges, I was mentally beat down.
Yeah.
And so I didn't do 75 hard to get physically stronger or better because I was already in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
I'm in better shape now, but I was in pretty good shape relative to standards. And it was really to get me out of my mental funk and become that warrior that I was to build a new business and build new life. So I did it then, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is such I had this epiphany on day 40, and you talked about drinking earlier. I was like, I've done sober October, dry January, stuff of that nature, about 30 days, right? I had this epiphany on day 40, or the first time I did. I hadn't been 40 days without 1 drop of alcohol since I was 17 years old.
Oh my God.
And I was 41 at the time. I was like, how sad is that?
Yep.
Whereas, because it might be a nightly routine that you just go home and pour a glass of bourbon, and it might just be one, which was typically the case for me.
Right.
My wife would have a glass of wine, I'd have a glass of bourbon. But 40 days, I hadn't gone 40 days since I was 17. Like, that's sad.
Yeah.
And so now drinking, I've deprioritized a lot. I've had less than 15 drinks this year. I contemplated giving it up entirely, but I didn't want to neglect myself like a big win or a celebration or something of that nature. So it's been less than 15 drinks entirely in 2024.
Yep.
That being said, the physical part, my goal, every interaction that I have every day is to be the best hour of someone's day. So driving over here, I remind myself that I want to be the best hour of Dom and his audience's day.
Nice.
And so I can't do that if I'm not mentally and physically at my best. And so I think a lot of times people look at you or I or people that are in really good shape and they're like, oh, they must just love working out.
Well, this is a new development for me. I mean, I've been in shape my whole life, but literally the last 4 years, I just fell off the wagon hard. And I have this image that you talked about, the warrior image. My mom always said, you're my little warrior. I'm a big wrestler, competitive athlete, and did bodybuilding in the past. And then to see that person looking back at you in the mirror, like, that's not you. Like, what is going on here? Like, let's get it back, you know?
Well, I think that my point in that, in saying that is that, it's unattainable or something of that nature. I was like, no, there's lots of days I don't feel like working out.
Yeah.
And now I've gotten to that point through 75 Hard and doing it multiple times. I did Live Hard the first year I did it. Now I just sprinkle in, like if I ever feel like I'm off track, I just do another 30 days.
Yeah.
And I'm only 30 days away from being back to a peak condition.
Yeah.
And I just keep myself there. So my point in being that is like, there are lots of days I don't want to take a cold shower. Mm-hmm. There are lots of days I don't want to work out. And those are the days now mentally I go, I'm going to work out even harder because I don't want to.
Yep, exactly.
And then when you get through that mental hurdle and you get done with that workout, you're like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so many benefits. It could be a whole podcast just on the benefits of exercise and obviously health and wellness. But in terms of your life, obviously had a lot of success in business. You're obviously kicking ass and taking names in the consulting and leadership training. Your podcast obviously is taking off, hundreds of episodes coming up soon. Of course, balancing all this now while being a loving husband, a loving father, being present for your family. So again, I can relate. I got 2 young kids, a beautiful wife. I want to be present for them. Mm-hmm. So I guess, why do you feel it's important, first of all, that I am present for my family? And again, it ties into everything you said, get more efficient with your business, EOS, leadership, because leadership multiplies when you train leaders. Make sure you get right with your business and your systems and your processes so you have the time to be present with your family. But I guess, how do you feel that you've been able to balance that in your life, or at least make sure your family still knows that when you're home, you're there with your family?
Well, first of all, I'm not perfect. I still, just so everyone knows, like sometimes you get on podcasts and be like, oh, they must have it all figured out. Yeah. No, like there are plenty of times where my 10-year-old will be like, put down your phone, Dad. I'm like, thanks for calling me out, sweetie.
Yeah, exactly.
Because she's right. I'm at home and I'm, checking something that I just need to be present. So I'll start with that and be vulnerable with that. That being said, they're recognizing that there is never going to be a balance. Yeah. Because balance indicates 50-50. And that's the premise that has been tossed upon us and has been popularized in society, and especially for us entrepreneurs. There is no balance. No. Okay? So what you have to strive for is either work-life harmony or work-life integration. Because as entrepreneurs, we don't turn off. Yeah. Right? Our minds are always going. Like last night, I laid an hour in bed just mind racing. Like I was tired before I went to bed. I watched that stupid debate last night, and
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, right. And I was drained. Like I'm ready for bed. It was like 9:30. It ends. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go straight to sleep. Nope, mind racing for an hour. Yeah. So the point is like, how do I integrate my life? So the easiest way to do this is like actual tactical. When you look at your calendar, schedule in your want tos before your have tos. So if you want to go to your kid's soccer game or your kid wrestles, right? So he wrestles. I got flag football for Cam. The girls are at dance. Like I get their dance schedule and their competitions. Those are on my calendar. I go to, Cam's soccer or Cam's football, like I'm helping coach. Like that's on my calendar. Like if Jenna wants to do a date night, that's on my calendar before anything else. Yeah. Right? So it's your want tos before your have tos, because if you do it in the reverse order and you have all your have tos, they'll bleed into your want tos, because that's just who we are. We got to get shit done. Yeah. So we have to put barriers and put our want tos in first. So then it's like, okay, well, now I've built a life where like it's pretty much I work 9 to 4. And I put that in air quotes because, of course, when I get the kids to bed, I'm back either on my email or doing something social media wise, or my mind's running on something else. So it's never turning off, but really my focus time is to be as efficient as possible between 9 and 4. I get a ruck in the morning and a late afternoon workout. And then that late afternoon workout is like that break for me to go from work mode, workout, okay, now my mind's reset to go into family mode. And also learning that testosterone peaks in late afternoon. Yeah. So a lot of people may get a morning pump. Well, your pump's actually better in late afternoon because for men, testosterone peaks late afternoon. So I get my ruck in, fasted cardio in the morning, and then the lift later in the day. So it's just figuring out little ways, little hacks. making sure that if your home calendar is scheduled before your work calendar, you're not going to miss out on those things that you want to. Like not going to miss out on a kid's birthday, not going to miss out on a sporting event, not going to miss out on a dance competition. Like those should be priorities in your life and not schedule over them. The other key to do that is a lot of times I'll see business owners schedule over meetings with their employees. That will breed distrust so fast because what you're telling them is that they're not as important as the customer or the next sale or whatever else you're scheduling over for them. Right. So if you have one of your key employees and you guys have regularly scheduled meetings, do not move that.
Correct.
Do not, because you're telling them, even though that you mean no harm by it, you're telling them that they don't matter as much as whatever else you're replacing them with. So keep that calendar really sacred and live by it.
I wanted to share a story with you. We actually, one thing I'm proud of as of today, this could be different in the future, but I'm proud today Grosso University has a 5-star review on Google. We have perfect 5-star review, but we do have one 1-star review. And this is, I think it's a made-up person. It was Metaphysical Missy. Okay, I'm going to call her out. But she went to one of our sales training events, and she says that Grosso University essentially is loaded with toxic masculinity.
Oh, yes. Okay. The buzzwords.
Yeah, the buzzword toxic masculinity. And what's funny about that is the person this is a sales training competition that I host once a year. It's called Closers Camp. The person that won the whole event was a female. She loved it, gave me a 5-star review. I had all kinds of 5-star reviews from like dozens of females that went through the training because we do pay attention to that. But can you speak to that term toxic masculinity and why a man being a man is actually one of the things that we need to get back in this country?
Yeah, I'd love to. That's a great topic.
Thank you.
All right, so
I saw that because I was going through your podcast and I saw there's a couple episodes, specifically on that. I'm like, I got to bring this up because it's like our only 1-star review, and this industry is a highly masculine industry. It just is what it is. But it's not something that I would be afraid of, is being a masculine male, for God's sakes.
No.
I'm proud of that. So
no, in fact, what people should be scared of is beta males. Because they don't have the ability to protect. They don't typically provide. And they typically take a back seat and get bossed around by their spouse. We are naturally wired differently, males and females. Yeah. And honoring both the feminine energy and the masculine energy is actually what is needed. So the media and all these, just kind of crazy people that threw out this toxic masculinity piece is like, it's actually done more harm than it has helped. Yep. But by a long shot. Because what you're telling men to do is actually not be masculine. Because you put a bad word in front of it and now are labeling being masculine in general, which is a natural wiring from God, as a bad thing. Right. No, what we are is natural providers, natural protectors, and natural at being able to do things that the woman is not good. Like, it's the yin yang. So if anyone ever pays attention to the Chinese yin yang symbol, right? There's the white with the little black dot and the black with the little white dot. What that's always represented to me is for every corresponding strength, for every strength, major strength, there's a corresponding weakness. For every major weakness, there's a corresponding strength. That's also the masculine and feminine energy coming together. That's why when God created Adam and Eve, like, he noticed in the garden that Adam was not whole without having a companion. Yeah. He took his rib and created the perfect companion to complement each other. Yeah. And so, like, just imagine for a moment that we just said that there was toxic femininity.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, just like no one ever like insane. Flips that. It's absolutely insane. Like, being masculine is not bad. Right. The lack of masculinity in society is awful.
It's dangerous.
It's very dangerous, right? There's that ancient proverb that says you'd rather be a warrior in a garden than versus a gardener in a war. Yeah. It's like the ability to, and Jordan Peterson says this really well, but the ability to cause harm and then being able to reserve that is far more noble than someone that has no ability to cause harm. Yeah. Because they have no reservation because they can't do it in general. And right, and you talk to, like, I have the privilege of interviewing former special ops all the time, from Navy SEALs to Green Berets, whatever. Like, they've seen the worst of the worst in this world, and their ability to cause harm, but yet they are some of the most peaceful individuals now that you will ever speak to, because they know that in a moment's notice, if they had to, they could turn it on and actually crush another human being.
Yep.
They choose not to, versus a beta male that has no ability to crush another human being, and there's no choice in that matter.
Right.
They can't do it anyhow. So the toxic masculinity is just, it makes my skin crawl.
Yeah.
Because again, if you flip that and said there's toxic femininity, what we have is a inappropriate balance in really like a societal talking points, right? And so we need to get back to honoring both feminine energy and masculine energy and how they both complement each other in such a profound way.
Yeah, that's what makes that so beautiful, right? And complete and whole. Or they want to just make it one-sided or one side or the other. It was crazy. This actually was highly disappointing because I actually used to like his movies. But if you saw that interview with James Cameron when he talked about how testosterone is a poison that needs to go away. You basically like, what? Yeah, so basically you just want to erase men from the face of the earth. That's basically what he said.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just thought that was interesting, but I don't want to derail the conversation, but I thought it would be fitting to talk about that. And
now there is a narcissist problem in this world.
Yeah.
I think that's an important distinction, but it's not like I had a female, though I told you about the male that was narcissist in my office that caused the problems. I also had a female that was extremely narcissistic. And so like it can go both ways. And by the way, narcissists should never be in a leadership position because it's always about themselves. And the easiest way to spot one, and there are a lot of salespeople, great salespeople that have narcissistic traits. Now, whether or not they're clinical narcissists.
That's why they're great at sales.
Exactly. That being said, the easiest way to spot one is if they cannot accept any blame. Okay. Right? So if you're interviewing for people and you don't want to deal with a narcissist and have those people problems, tell me about a situation that you screwed up or that this went wrong in your previous workplace, and how did you deal with that? What you're looking for is, can they accept blame? Like if you and I were in an argument and I was so sure I was right, I might be 90% right, but there's at least 1%, 10%, 20%, whatever it may be, that I could see how I was part of that problem. Yeah. A narcissist literally cannot see that they were any percentage of that problem.
Yeah, you have that in interviews where they just go on and on and on about previous ownership, previous leadership. It's just toxic, this guy was an asshole, this guy was a jerk, this guy took advantage. It's always everybody else, but it's like, okay, one person's an asshole, you could be right, but if everyone's an asshole, you're the asshole. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
And if you don't think you have any narcissistic traits, you probably are the worst narcissist of them all.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, a lot of great stuff. We talk about all the things we do to, lead by example and inspire. I had something really cute happen to me recently, because obviously we want to lead by example for our kids too. As I'm, getting in shape for this bodybuilding thing, my son comes up to me the other day. He's like, "Dad, I see you working out more and getting stronger, and it's making me think I should be doing that too." And now it's like a switch went off in his head, because he's seeing what Daddy's doing. He goes and sets a 1-hour timer, and I have this little gym in my basement. He goes down there for an hour and starts lifting weights and doing push-ups and sit-ups and working out. And now we got him into wrestling, and he absolutely loves it. And he's kind of slowly turning into this little mini warrior now. And I just love watching this journey and transformation, knowing that what I'm doing, obviously, I'm trying to do it so I can better myself, so I can be better for them. But seeing it already have that impact and inspiring him to start taking that path in his life. He's only 8 years old,
Yeah, Cam's 7. People, just like your people that you lead in your business, will follow your actions more than your words. It's the same with our kids. Cam went to Carbon with us this summer a lot, and he fell in love with the rower. Yeah. He did like 3,300 meters one day. I was like, buddy, I can't even do that, or I don't want to. I could do it, I don't want to. But he was straight up on the rower, his little body going 3,300 meters.
Nice. So again, I appreciate your time. Obviously, I know you got a lot going on. Time's very valuable. But if people want to get in contact with you to learn more about your leadership coaching, or of course get involved with EOS, I guess what's the best way to contact you?
So great SEO, because I don't know any other Josh Kosnicks on the planet. So at Josh Kosnick is all my social media. JoshKosnick.com is where you can find me easiest. FiveBridgesFarm.com if anyone wants to use the property that's local or wants to fly their team in. Those are probably the easiest spots. And I'd love, I say this on my episodes as well for the guests, whatever your most valuable takeaway is today, hit me up in DMs or something. Like, I love to know what resonated with people.
Yeah, and it's cool because you deliver so much free content out there. You do your ruck talks all the time, and you just get out there and you speak what's on your mind, and you're genuine, you're authentic about it. It's just unfiltered, unafraid, and I really like that. So if people want to get a taste as to who you are, your personality, you have so much content out there. People can get a good understanding as to like who you are and whether or not, a person they want to pursue. But again, I've saw nothing but great things. I've heard nothing but great things from people that work with you. Obviously, we got a lot of mutual friends and connections. So
for sure.
But I just want to congratulate you.
Thank you,
on
brother.
all your success.
Thanks for having me in. This has been fun. Hopefully everyone got a great impact out of this.
Always packed full of great information, so I appreciate it. So another amazing episode of the Profits for Sanity podcast. Again, we appreciate your time. I know there's a million podcasts you could be watching, and it's not something we take lightly. Hopefully you took a lot of notes away from this podcast. Be sure to tune in every other week as we're going to be bringing on additional bright-minded individuals just like Josh here. They're going to show you how to grow and scale a more profitable business. But as we sign off each one of these episodes, as always in the world of business, volume is for vanity and profit is for
sanity.
All right. So I appreciate it. We'll see you on the next one.